putting it all together. Okay, by now you have your initial premise, which is also your main storyline. You have your main characters, your viewpoint character number 2, your viewpoint character number 3, and one subplot. How are you going to write about each one of these and keep track of what you're doing to make sure you keep the storyline moving enough to keep your readers glued to your book? That's the big question, isn't it? That's the question that prevented me from ever finishing my first book for years. I'd get a great idea, my initial premise, I'd think up some interesting characters, and I'd jump in and start writing. Well, by the time I got to page 50 or 75, things started slowing down or falling apart. I never seemed to be able to get past page 75. Then, several years later, I was lucky enough to stumble on a book called The Marshall Plan for Novel Writing. This book literally changed my life. Why? Because it showed me how to write in sections. Think of sections as scenes, and how to put section points together in an outline form that created energy, drama, and interest in my book. I suggest you find the Marshall Plan for Novel Writing and purchase it. Because of this book, I have been able to write one book a year for the last 7 years. Let's talk about book lengths. Different genres of books have different expected word count lengths. Examples: the average mystery novel turns out to be around 60 to 65,000 words. A silhouette book romance runs between 53,000 and 58,000 words. They're very particular in how long they want those books to be. Historical romances can run much longer. They can be between 100,000 and 125,000 words. You can easily find the recommended length of your genre by doing a Google search. Since I write mystery novels, I'll use that genre as an example. Let's talk about the section sheet. The section sheet I use is very simple compared to the section sheet found in the Marshall Plan book, but it works for me. I would advise you to compare mine with the one in the book and see what would be the best for you. Disregard the top of the sheet for now. We'll talk about that later. Let's talk about the bottom. This is where you will write each scene in your novel. Each section sheet will be one scene from your novel. When you do this, visualize a movie with each scene helping to move the story forward. Just for reference, if your book is about 60,000 words, the size of a typical mystery novel, you should end up with about 50 scenes or 50 pages of your section sheets. It's important to remember that a section sheet captures one scene in your book. Later on, I'll be giving some examples using my book on Safe Harbor. The reason I struggled for so many years without being able to get very far in my initial writing was because I didn't understand how to dramatically tell a story that kept the reader engaged while still moving the narrative forward. I would just start writing the main storyline in my main character's voice and keep writing that way until I ran out of steam. That's not how to do it. When I discovered the Marshall Plan book, it explained how to weave the story together using the main storyline, the subplot, and other voices like the viewpoint character number 2 and number 3. When you write your scenes and follow that pattern, your novel moves along with more interest and excitement. The Marshall Plan method even shows you where you should add your elements of surprise. Look at my section sheet guide. Notice that the first 3 section sheets will be filled out in your main character's voice, and the story will be the lead main storyline. When you get to the fourth section sheet, you will move on to write about your subplot. Again, in your main character's voice if possible. If your subplot begins in another location before your main character even knows about it, then you'll have to write that section sheet 4 in another character's voice. When you get to section sheet 5, you'll switch back to the main storyline in your main character's voice. Now, when you get to the 6th section sheet, you will speak in your viewpoint character 2's voice. I'm sure you're wondering how long should each section sheet be. Remember, these are just notes to be used when you actually start to write your book. You're plotting and outlining your book doing this. The section sheets can range from one paragraph to several pages, whatever is necessary to complete that scene. Another thing to remember is that these are not chapters. They are only scenes in your novel. Now, it is true that any new chapter should start with a new section sheet. When I go from writing in the main character's voice to writing in another character's voice, I always skip 2 lines to indicate to the reader what is happening.